everybody, this is Lisa, the Bearfoot Baker. Welcome back to Bearfoot Basics Sugar Cookies 101 Part 3. Now let me start off by saying I am so sorry that it took me this long to get this video up. I could sit here and give you excuse after excuse like life is busy, things happen, but the bottom line is I didn't get it to you fast enough, so I apologize. So hopefully you'll forgive me and we can move on and start decorating cookies. This is where things really get exciting when you decorate cookies because you've baked your cookies, you've made your icing, and now you're ready to start decorating. Now, the problem is royal icing doesn't always behave. It's not always a good icing. Sometimes it's difficult to work with because it has a mind of its own. Well, today we're going to talk about some of the challenges that you face when you work with royal icing. I can't answer all your questions for you, but I'm going to do the best I can to answer some of those that just drive us crazy. Now remember, whenever you run into a problem with royal icing, there is a solution. So hopefully today we're going to cover most of those, and if not, later when we take the deeper dive, hopefully I can get to the questions that are stopping you from being the decorator that you want to be, because I know you can do it. Okay, are you guys ready to begin? I think we need to start at the beginning, which is a good royal icing recipe. There are so many good recipes out there. I think that you just need to play with a few and try it until you find one you like. Feel free to use mine. I'll put a link below so you can easily get to it. Callie, Sweet Sugar Belle, Bridget, Bake at 350, Marion at Sweetopia, and Georgianne at Lila Lola. Everybody has a really good recipe that works for them. So what I think you need to do is practice a little bit, find one that you like. Now, just keep in mind, no royal icing recipe is going to turn out perfect the first time you make it. But that's okay. You're going to learn some tips and tricks that will help you tweak it, and then it'll be the perfect royal icing for you. Now keep in mind, earlier when I said sometimes royal icing isn't good, I didn't mean it's not good. It's perfect for making sugar cookies. What I meant is it doesn't behave, or it behaves differently, and you have to figure out which recipe is going to work well with you in the humidity that you live in. If I go to a different state, I find I usually use a lot more water to make my royal icing than when I live or when I'm here at home. In Tennessee, it's very humid where I live. So again, I make thicker icing and decorate it because that's what works for me. And that's one thing that we're going to try to figure out today. What works for you? When you make royal icing, do you make it with meringue powder or egg whites? I prefer making it with meringue powder. And if you do make it with egg whites, let's talk a little bit about that real quick. If you make it with egg whites, you need to use pasteurized eggs because we all know that raw eggs can contain salmonella or other foodborne illnesses. And if an egg has been pasteurized, that means the egg has been treated in its shell for a short period of time. So basically they heat the egg and then they cool it off. What that does is it helps kill the bacteria and viruses, which helps reduce the risk of foodborne illnesses. The people that are more susceptible to salmonella are the elderly and younger children. So in my opinion, it's just best to be safe than sorry and just go ahead and use pasteurized eggs. If you've never bought pasteurized eggs before, they're located in the grocery store next to the non-pasteurized eggs. When you open the carton, if you look at the top of the eggs, they'll have the letter P stamped on top for pasteurized eggs. So again, sometimes that's just one of those things. I think it's best to be safe than sorry and go ahead and use a good pasteurized egg so you reduce the risk of making anybody sick. Since we just mentioned meringue powder, I thought this would be, a good opportunity for us to just talk about it for a little bit. Some of you guys may be new to cookie decorating and you may be thinking, what is meringue powder? Well, basically, meringue powder is an egg white substitute. It contains things like cornstarch, dried egg whites, sugar, citric acid, and then they put other stabilizers in. And it is made with pasteurized eggs, so it is a bit safer than using raw eggs. So I just thought I'd throw that out there for you guys in case you wanted to know. Let's talk about cream of tartar now. I often get asked if people should use cream of tartar in their royal icing recipe. Well, it depends. If you look on the back of your meringue powder and it lists cream of tartar, don't add it to your royal icing because you're just doubling up on it, and there's no need to do that. If you use egg whites, yes, you need to add cream of tartar. What it does is, cream of tartar is a stabilizer. It'll help your royal icing look really, really white. And it also helps stabilize the egg whites, which helps prevent the icing from falling flat when you decorate. So, it is really good. And especially if you use egg whites, I think, you definitely need to add the cream of tartar because it will just really stabilize those eggs for you. Here's something that I find really interesting. Do you know where cream of tartar comes from? It's actually a byproduct from the winemaking process. When the grapes get fermented during the process, a powder forms on the side of the barrels. Then they scrape the barrels down and they clean that powder up and they grind it up, and that's how we get cream of tartar. Who knew that we were using byproducts of wine every single time we made icing, royal icing anyways? I think that's really interesting. Okay, I know you're at your home or at work or somewhere else, and I'm at my house, but I still want you to follow along here. I want you to raise your hand if you mix your royal icing more than 7 minutes. Okay, now raise your hand if you mix it more than 5 minutes. Okay, now raise your hand if you mix it more than 3 minutes. All right, I'm doing this as a little demonstration because when I first started decorating cookies, I followed the recipe to a T, and it said to mix the royal icing for 7 minutes. I did that, and I realized that basically I was mixing it so much that I was whipping air into the royal icing, and which means that when I went to decorate cookies, I had a ton of air bubbles. And also, if I put the cookies in front of a fan to dry, there was no shine. So by over mixing my icing, it caused me a lot of problems. Like I said, there was way too many air bubbles, and then there was no shine whatsoever. Okay, so what I want you to take away from this is there's no magic number for how long to mix your royal icing. That's just something that you have to learn. You have to try and figure it out in your area with your humidity and all that stuff. But here's the thing I want you to keep in mind. The longer you mix your icing, the more air bubbles you're going to have, and it will cause some other problems that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. So how long do I mix my royal icing? Just until the ingredients are mixed. That's it. No more, no less. Okay, so let's talk about some of the royal icing issues. Like we just talked about, the less you stir your icing, the less air bubbles you'll have. But this even means as you're adding your colors, like when you add your food gel to it and you start to mix it up, the more you stir it, even during that process, the more air bubbles you're going to have. So just keep that in mind and be careful not to overmix. Also, once you add your colors, did you know, like, once you add, let's say you're making red royal icing, and you're looking for the perfect red because you need to match a birthday invitation that somebody gave you. When you mix it, and you get it the exact color of red on the birthday invitation, but then you go to bed and you wake up the next morning, and your red is actually a couple shades darker, that's because the food gel, the icing, will develop overnight, and it'll dry a shade or two darker. So keep that in mind. If you have wedding invitations or birthday invitations and you really need to match that color, you probably need to mix your icing a couple shades lighter. That way it will match when it dries. So let's talk about the freshness of royal icing. I personally don't like using it after it's a week old, but the rule of thumb is royal icing will stay fresh, in an airtight container on the counter for 2 weeks. Some people keep it in the refrigerator. That's one of those things that you just have to decide for yourself. I keep mine on the kitchen counter, and I've never had any problems with it. Now, how I do this is, remember a little while ago when I said that royal icing doesn't always behave? Well, this is one of those situations where it doesn't behave. it will crust quickly, which means the top layer of the royal icing will dry and it'll be kind of crusty, but then underneath the icing is wet. So your goal, and all of our goal, is to keep the air off the royal icing. We don't want air to touch it. So usually what I do is once I make the icing, I put it in a glass container with an airtight lid. But before I put the lid on it, I actually take a piece of plastic wrap and lay the piece of plastic wrap on top of the icing. So the plastic wrap is touching the icing. And what this does is it keeps the air off, which in turn keeps my icing fresher longer. I know you guys have probably heard me talk about this a million times, but Gail from One Tough Cookie gave me one of the best tips I've ever got. And she didn't just give it to me, she gave it to all of us. One of the best tips I've ever heard of since I've been decorating cookies. Royal icing and water do not play well together. Like, I'm sure you all know that if you get your icing too thin and you try to flood a cookie, that the royal icing will just run off the side of the cookie. And, you know, that's not what we want. We want to pipe the icing on there and we want it to stay. So getting the right consistency of royal icing is a really hard thing for us to learn when we start decorating cookies. Well, in comes Gail with her magic tip, her trick, whatever you want to call it. It's just the miracle thing. She actually did a post that she called Give It a Spritz, and I'll link to it below. Basically what she did is she took a water bottle, and instead of adding teaspoon after teaspoon or tablespoon or whatever to the icing to get it the right consistency, all she did was she took that spray bottle and she sprayed her icing and mixed it, and then she would spray it again and mix it until she got it the right consistency. Wow, this like saved me so much heartache, because when I was adding teaspoon after teaspoon to the icing, you know, it would almost be the right consistency, and then I would just feel the need to add another teaspoon, which would make it too runny and my icing would fall off the cookies. So once Gail did that, I was a new person. I felt like I could decorate absolutely anything. So Gail, if you're listening, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You seriously changed the way that I made cookies, and I'm sure you've helped a lot of other people with this tip. Okay, next we're going to talk about making royal icing thick. Now for me, it's kind of weird because when I first started decorating cookies, I would just thin the icing, then add food gel colors, and just kind of, I was very chaotic when I made my icing. Well, as time has gone on, I have heard other decorators and people say that when you're making royal icing, you want to make it thick to begin with. Then what you want to do is you want to add your food gel color while the icing is thick. And then once you get the color you want, then you work on consistency. They say that when you add water to like white royal icing and then add food gel colors, that what that can do is it can actually make your cookies dry. Once you put the icing on the cookies, you know, your cookie will look nice and full with icing and it'll be pretty. And then, you know, as it dries, the icing will settle down and make you have a bumpy surface on top of the cookies. So I really and truly, I'm going to be honest, I don't know the science behind this, but I've seen it work on my own cookies. So the best tip that I can give you as far as color goes, you color first, then worry about the consistency. And if you think back, you've probably noticed the same thing. You know, you decorate these cookies and you think, oh, those look so nice, you know, so cute. And then when you wake up in the morning, they look kind of like, I don't know, they look kind of bumpy, splotchy, like, you know, your icing just isn't smooth. So you may want to try this. And like I said, it may not work for everybody, but I know that I've tried it and it definitely works for me. So I'm going to say it again, color first, then work on consistency. Every time I see a picture of those little bottles, it definitely makes me giggle. I don't know if you've listened to lesson number 2 or you've read the post on my blog, The Santa Cookie That Started It All. If you have, then you'll understand what I'm talking about. Those little tiny icing bottles are the reason I started making cookies. If you want to hear a funny story, hop back over to Sugar Cookies 101 Part 2 and listen. I don't think anybody got started decorating cookies quite like I did, but those little bottles are what did it for me. So I want to talk about them for just a second though. When you decorate cookies, you need to find something that you're comfortable with. I bought the little bottles because it looked simple. It looked easy to put the icing in. I mean, it just looked like it would be a total game changer. So the more I used the bottles, the less I liked them. Not because of the bottles themselves, but like I said, I live in a very high humidity area, and as soon as I would put the icing in, I mean, it wouldn't take it very long at all to separate. The humidity is just a killer for icing. So I found myself going to, more and more back to the decorating bags. So, which broke my heart because I love those little bottles and I wish that they would work. And they probably would if I tried them again. But I always found myself, like I said, turning it upside down, squeezing it, taking the top off. And thank goodness Sweet Sugar Belle, thank you, Callie, has made those long spatulas that you can stick in there, long and skinny, that you can stick down in the bottle and stir it up, because it really does help. So maybe I should try to use them again. I know most people absolutely love them, and they're probably shocked when they hear me say that I'm more of a piping bag kind of girl than I am the icing bottle kind of girl. But Sharon at Truly Mad Plastics really kind of changed me a little bit, because before Cookie Con, I ordered hundreds of those bags from her, and when I got them, I absolutely fell in love with them. Now, I had used some before from somebody else. I bought them online, and it was a different brand and everything. Immediately, as soon as I put the icing in, they had little holes in them. And no matter how I cut the tip off, the icing always came out wonky. I spent way too much time trying to figure those bags out. But then when I used Sharon's, I heard all you decorators online and Facebook and everything saying how much that you love Truly Mad Plastics bags, tipless bags. I ordered some and I fell in love. And I find myself using them more and more and more every day. So I do use the bottles occasionally, not very often at all. I used to use the decorating bags, like, a Tico, or mostly a Tico. And then when Sharon came along with her tipless bags, you don't have to wash tips, you don't have to do anything. I will always use all of them, but right now my favorite is the tipless bags. So just kind of keep that in mind, because if you're decorating and you're not comfortable, or you do not like what you're decorating with, then chances are you're not going to have fun decorating. So just keep practicing and playing until you find something that you like, because if you're happy, then your cookies will show it. Okay, after you make your royal icing, does it look like it has some kind of warts or chicken pox or something? Look at the picture. All those air bubbles in that one bowl of royal icing. Yikes, that can really mess up your cookie design. Once you make your royal icing, it's a good thing to let it rest. If you let it rest for a few minutes, then all the air bubbles will kind of rise to the surface. And once they do that, now you don't want to let it rest too long, because remember we talked about how royal icing, the top layer dries really fast and it gets kind of hard and then it forms a crust. Well, we don't want to do that. But if you let it rest for just a little while before you cover it, just a few minutes before you cover it with your plastic wrap, those air bubbles will rise to the top, and then you can take a spatula and just roll it over the top and kind of pop them, then put your plastic wrap on top. That's going to save you a lot of frustration when you try to decorate. Now, about 3 years ago, somebody said that if you shake the royal icing, if you shake the bowl, that will help the air bubbles rise to the surface. And it does, it works. Sometimes I fold up like a dish towel or something once I make the icing, and then I'll place the bowl on the dish towel, but I'll kind of just like gently pick it up and tap it on the bowl for just a couple minutes, and you can just watch all those air bubbles rise to the surface. And again, you just want to take a spatula and pop the bubbles off the top, then cover it with plastic wrap, and then place it in your airtight container, whatever it is that you do to it. But it's crazy how many air bubbles can get into one batch of royal icing. So remember, the more you stir it, the more air bubbles you're going to have. To get rid of some of the air bubbles, again, you can just let it rest for a couple minutes, or you can shake it and tap it, and this is going to save you a ton of frustration when it comes time to decorate those cookies. My 2-year-old granddaughter runs through the house singing Let It Go. I'm sure you guys have heard that song. She doesn't need music or anything. She just runs and sings, and she's just as happy as she can be. Well, watching her, it made me realize that I need to be singing something like Let It Go, but I need to sing Let It Flow, because that's what I want my icing to do. I hate clogged tips. I hate when I squeeze the bottle and nothing comes out. I just want my icing to flow. When I squeeze it, when I apply a little bit of pressure, I want that icing to come out. And when I stop squeezing, I want it to stop. So when we first start decorating cookies, we have a tendency to touch the cookies with a decorating tip, and that's okay. Now what I want you to do, if you still decorate that way, what I want you to do is I want you to touch the cookie with a decorating tip and start to squeeze until the icing comes out. As the icing comes out, lift your bag or bottle away from the cookie until you have a nice little line of icing. Kind of see how it is there in the picture? And then once that happens, use your other hand, the hand that you're not squeezing the bag with, use it as a guide and guide it around the cookie and let that string of icing fall on the edge of the cookie. Now, when you do this, the edge of the cookie almost acts like a magnet. So as you pull it around and as you're guiding it, it will kind of fall right onto the edge of the cookie, which is really good because that's what you want. If I tried to hold my piping tip really close to the cookie and make a line around it without that string, without that little space where I can let the icing fall, then my cookie's going to the icing's going to look all wonky, it's going to look shaky and weird. Whereas if I hold it, if I let the icing touch the cookie and then I lift it away and that string forms and it falls around, then it's going to look really good. So here's my tip to you from my granddaughter. Let your icing flow. I know you can do it. Don't force it. Just let it flow. So remember earlier when I talked about how cookies could be splotchy or blotchy? Well, now let's talk about a few things that can make that happen. If you overmix your icing, here we go back to that overmixing thing. If you add food gel color to your icing and you overmix it, it can cause the icing to crystallize, which could result in dark spots on the cookies when they dry. So again, just, be cautious and careful when you add your food color and don't overmix. Okay, something else that could cause problems is using too much food gel color. So when you add too much food gel color to your royal icing and you mix it up, then sometimes that can cause spots on your cookies and it can prevent the icing from drying. Have you ever thought that you decorated a cute cookie and you wake up in the morning, you let it dry overnight, and you wake up in the morning and you're going to package it up, but you touch it and for some reason the icing is not drying? Sometimes that's because we use too much food gel color. So remember before when we said, that the colors develop after you add food gel color, your icing will develop as it sits. This is another one of those things where you should use as much food gel color as you think. So maybe cut back on it a little bit if you have a problem with this. If you don't have a problem with it, hey, you're doing good, keep going. But if you do have a problem with your icing not drying, try using a little bit less food gel color and then let your colors develop before you move on. Okay, number 3, make sure to mix the food gel color in very well. Now here again, I've said don't overmix. Now I'm getting ready to tell you to mix. One of my things that I do myself, and please don't follow after me and please don't do this. For some reason, when it comes to brown royal icing, I don't mix it up completely. I mix it and I think it's mixed, and then once the cookies start drying, I see all these streaks in the brown color. So again, there's just a fine line of knowing how much to mix your icing and how little to mix your icing. So, don't have streaky brown icing like I do. Just mix it until your color is well mixed, then stop. Okay, next is humidity. Humidity gets me every time. We all know that humidity and royal icing don't mix. I mean, I feel like I've spent my entire cookie decorating career trying to figure out how humidity is going to affect my cookies, and it will affect them every single time. So I always try to be really cautious, and if you have humidity issues, you probably understand what I'm talking about. Whether it's humid today or not when I make cookies, it could be humid tomorrow. So if I decorate the cookies today and everything looks good and I wake up tomorrow and the colors haven't bled together or anything, then I think I'm safe. And then a couple hours later, I'll notice it start to bleed. That's because there's a lot of humidity in the air. So what I do is I decorate my cookies and I try to do it in stages. Like I'll add one color and I will wait several hours before I add the other. I can't talk. I'll wait several hours before I add other colors to it, because the more time I can give that color, that first color that I piped, the longer I can give it to dry, the safer my cookies are going to be. Okay. I get emails a lot by people saying, hey, my royal icing was great and it looked good. And then I went to bed and I woke up and I can't even explain what it does. It's almost like a little raindrop or something on the cookie that's almost like a white powdery raindrop. What happened? Well, the first thing I tell them to do is, the first thing I ask is, do you decorate cakes, or do you use your KitchenAid mixer, to mix oil or buttercream or anything like that? Chances are they say yes. So what happens is, if there's a tiny, tiny, tiny part of butter or oil or anything on the KitchenAid mixer blade or on your regular hand mixer blade, or if there's a little bit of oil in your bowl, then what that's going to do is it's really going to mess up your royal icing, because royal icing cannot take the oil. I mean, I clean my mixer and my beaters and even sometimes my piping tips, because like I decorate cakes. And so if I am using a piping tip and I had buttercream in it, and then next I'm going to use royal icing, if there's a tiny little bit of oil in that tip, then guess what? My royal icing is going to be messed up. So I just suggest that you take, time to clean your stuff really good. I'm not saying that you don't clean it. I'm just saying that one tiny, tiny small particle of oil can mess up your whole thing. So you may want to clean your beaters and stuff like that with vodka or lemon juice or something like that, just to help to get the oil out of it. But anyways, there's a few things that may cause your icing to, be blotchy and spotty and just not real attractive. Help, I have craters. I really don't know why I think that's funny, but I do. I'm not talking about the craters that are in the moon cookies. And yes, I did pick these moon cookies to kind of make a point that we get craters in our cookies. Those little tiny holes that just cave in and just mess up your entire cookie. I mean, we stay up late at night and we decorate these cookies and we make them look gorgeous the way we want. And then all of a sudden you look at your cookie in the morning or at 2 o'clock in the morning and there's a hole in it. So let's explain what the craters are and how they're caused and what we can do. So the craters are caused by air bubbles. When we decorate cookies, we tell you to take a toothpick or a turkey lacer and we pop the air bubbles in it. Well, sometimes we miss an air bubble and sometimes you can't see them, but you try to pop as many air bubbles as you can. Now let's say that we missed one. The royal icing will start to dry, and the top layer of that royal icing is heavy. It's heavier than air. So as that royal icing starts to dry, and if there's an air bubble underneath it, then the icing starts to get heavy and it pokes a hole. It like caves in that crater. So that's where it caves in that hole and causes a crater. So that's where that's come from. Okay, there's a couple ways to prevent it. One of them is a thing that I just came by lately and I absolutely love it, and it's a mini heat gun. So this thing is awesome. So once I decorate a cookie, and I don't know, I've seen several people using them online and everything, so I think this is becoming kind of popular. A lot of people use a heater fan too. Once you decorate your cookies, once you outline and flood, you put it in front of a heater fan, and that will dry the top layer of icing, and it'll dry it. So again, that helps prevent craters. Now, if you're going to use the mini heat gun, hold the heat gun maybe 5 or 6 inches away from your cookie, turn on the heat gun, and slowly kind of do a circular motion on your cookie a little bit just to dry the top layer of icing. What this is going to do is it's going to make your cookie shine like crazy. It's going to look wonderful. Second thing it's going to do is it's going to help set that top layer of icing, and it's going to dry a little bit deeper than a fan can that quickly. And so it's going to dry it and prevent the craters. It's going to help keep it from sinking and falling in. So I love this thing. Since I love it, I haven't had craters. Don't hardly have any like royal icing colors bleeding together. This thing is awesome. I'm going to link to it below. You don't have to get one. You can use a heater fan or whatever. Okay, so once I use the mini heat gun, I set the cookies directly in front of the fan, because just the air circulating like crazy, it just helps the icing dry. It helps it dry strong with the shine, and that's how I do it. Now, I do want to say this too. Be very careful not to overheat the cookies with the heat gun, because when you hold the heat gun to the icing, and if number one, if you're not moving it constantly, and you're just kind of holding it there, then what happens is the heat gun will start to crack your icing. So you want to be really careful and really play with your cookies and try to figure out how to time that and how to do that without it cracking your cookies. Hello, sunshine. Look at the shine on that cookie. Now, this cookie was dried by the little miniature heat gun that you see sitting there. Here's what I want you to notice though. Do you see where my thumb was on that cookie? When I went to pick up the cookie, I accidentally poked it. So the top layer of the icing is dry, and it's crusted, and it's shiny, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But underneath that top layer, it's still very wet. So I just kind of wanted to show you that, because if you do decide to use a mini heat gun, it's really easy to, poke a finger or something in the cookie, because it looks dry and it's shiny and it's beautiful, but the icing is not dry. So ever since I've been using this, I am just like blown away at the fact that my icing is it's beautiful. The colors don't run together. I don't have craters. So this little mini heat gun really and truly is one of my new favorite things. I do want to point this out though. I'm going to try to do a tutorial just on how I use it. And so hopefully that'll be coming up soon. But what I normally do is I put the cookies on a baking sheet, and I'll do the, I'll blow them with the miniature heat gun, the hot air from the miniature heat gun. I'll blow them with that when they're on the baking sheet, because after you use the miniature heat gun, basically it heats up the whole cookie and not just the icing. So if you try to pick up the cookie and you get it a little too warm, you can actually break the cookie in half if you get it too warm. So the best way that I like to do it is I put the cookie on the baking sheet, I outline and flood the cookie, I'll dry it a little bit with the mini heat gun, and then I put it in front of the fan. So, and I usually do this all on the baking sheet, so that way it's less, that's the least amount that I have to hold it. I hold the miniature heat gun, 5 to 6 inches away. I am constantly, moving it in a circular motion all along the surface of the cookie. And then I do that probably, like I said, 60 seconds. Sometimes I'll do it longer if it's a bigger cookie. So that's one of those things that you need to play with and figure out, what's going to work for you if you choose to get a mini heat gun. Okay, if you look at the second photo there, it looks like the icing is dry. I can touch it. I'm not leaving fingerprints. I'm not harming the cookie in any way. But same cookie, look at the next picture. If I push on it with my thumb, then I totally crush the cookie. I crush the icing. So the icing is very wet underneath. But what I like about this is, like I said in the last, slide, is I can use the mini heat gun. It stops the colors from bleeding together. It stops the craters, and it just lets that top layer dry really, nice and firm. And then you place it in front of a fan and you have gorgeous, gorgeous cookies. Oh, how I love royal icing transfers. They make my heart happy. But better yet, I love it when I can find a stencil that would make a really good pattern for royal icing transfers. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next image here. I want to talk about this slide. Or the sleigh. Okay, I bought this sleigh stencil from Hillary at the Cookie Countess, and it is perfect for royal icing transfers. So what I did is I got 2 blank sheets of paper, and I put the stencil, the only thing I had on it was one sleigh, and I placed it on, like the top left corner of the paper, and I airbrushed it. And then I picked it up and I kind of moved it below the one that I just airbrushed, and I airbrushed again. So basically what I did is I kept moving the sleigh around on the piece of paper until I had a full sheet of sleighs. And then I repeated it. So I kept going until I had 2 full sheets of sleighs, and that's what I used for my template. So then I put them on the back of a baking sheet and I taped it down. Then I covered it with wax paper and I taped that down as well, because this, as you know, is how we would do any royal icing transfer. So the full tutorial for this sleigh is on my blog, and you can find the link below. So what I did was I just airbrushed it. Well, I piped it and I let it dry a little bit, and then I airbrushed it. So I don't want you to just look at stencils as a stencil that you use just like a stencil. I want you to look at stencils for their shapes and their patterns, because really and truly you can come up with some amazing royal icing transfers with stencils. Okay, I want to tell you this. Never give up. Never, ever, ever, never, ever give it up. Because some really good blog friends of mine have shared photos with me, and they've allowed me to share them with you. So hang on tight, because you're in for a real treat. But what I want you to think of the whole time you look at these is never, ever, ever give up. Do you guys see these cookies here? These cookies were made by Bridget at Bake It 350. The Kiss Me, Be Mine, Cutie, those were the first cookies that Bridget ever made. Okay, now look at the cherry cookies. Look at those perfect little cherry cookies with the white and yellow polka dot backgrounds. I mean, my goodness, those cookies are absolutely gorgeous. They look like they're so good that they were made by a machine or something instead of a human. So Bridget bakes cookies, and she learns how to do things, and then she teaches us how to do it. So I am so glad that those Be Mine, Kiss Me, and Cutie cookies are the first ones that she made. And I'm even more glad that she kept going, and now we have cookies from her like these cherry cookies. Totally amazing. Thank you, Bridget, for sharing these with us. Okay, do you guys know Amy at Cloud9 Cookies? She's a sweetheart, and I love, love, love her cookies. Do you see that little Thanksgiving set there? Guess what? That's the first cookies that Amy made. Now, check out those pineapples. Holy guacamole, Batman. Look at those things. The depth that's in there, the airbrushing. I mean, seriously, that looks like a real pineapple. That does not look like a cookie to me. So Amy, again, you know, she's played with icing, and she's learned, and she's practiced, and look how good she is. And she didn't give up. Next, let's move on to Georgianne Lila Lola. Look at her little crown cookies. How cute. First cookies she ever made. But look at her now. The thing that I love about Georgianne is when I see that cookie that says 2017, I see the confetti and the fireworks and the clocks and everything. It screams Georgianne to me. So not only did Georgianne keep going and she kept working at it, she knows how to make beautiful cookies, beautiful decorations, decorated cookies, but also look at her style. I can be on Facebook or Pinterest or anything and see a picture of her cookies, and without actually seeing who made it, I know she did it because she made it, she kept going, and she has a style. I love it. Next we have Cookie Architect. This is Rebecca's. I think this is so cute because not only did she give us cookies, she gave us almost the same set of cookies. They're almost the same color, they're the same shapes and everything, but check out the cookies. The cookies on the seal pads, on the baking sheets, are really good. I mean, I would never guess that that's somebody's first cookies. I mean, they're really, really good. But then look at the second picture over there. Her cookies are like flawless. She did not give up. She kept going. She mastered it, and seriously, they look like ornaments. They are absolutely flawless and gorgeous. Okay, can you guys guess whose cookies these are? Well, I'm sure you can because it says Sweet Sugar Belle at the top. See the cookies on the rack? The Texas and the stocking and the tree and the candy cane? Those are the very first cookies that Sweet Sugar Belle made. And then look over to the right. Check out those strawberry cookies and the flowers. Again, they're absolutely flawless. I mean, it's almost hard to believe that people, like all of these decorators that shared cookies with us, it's hard to believe that people are so good that they can make cookies look this flawless. Now, Callie didn't give up. And now she has this amazing product line. So not only do we see her cookies and she teaches us how to decorate and style, we can also buy her cookie cutters that she has designed and we can use them at home. I mean, seriously, this cookie thing, totally loving it. Now, here we are. We're going to go to me. You guys have heard about the Santa cookie that started it all. Guess what? There he is. That's the little cookie that I saw on Martha Stewart. I saw Danny Fiore decorate him, and I convinced myself that was the only cookie that I could ever make, and I paid over $66 for that cookie cutter on eBay because I got into a bidding war with somebody named Bridget. No, it's not our Bridget at Bake It 350 because I did ask her. So it's not her, but someone out there. I fought for this cookie cutter and I won. But now look, and there's my little bear. That's from my book, 100 Animal Cookies. And so again, I didn't give up. I never in a million years thought that I would be doing what I'm doing today. I never thought I would be teaching people how to decorate cookies and, do something fun like this. So I want you guys to seriously go through what I've taught you in this, part 1, part 2, part 3 of Basic Sugar Cookies 101. I want you guys to go through it and take the information that applies to you. Not everything's going to apply to you. Not everybody's going to agree with everything that I say, and that's okay. Because you know what? This is what works for me, and I know it's going to work for a lot of you out there. And if there's something that you don't have the answer to, or, you can't figure out, please contact me. Contact one of the other bloggers. We're here. We're happy to help you. But the key is just don't give up. Never give up. And if you keep going and you keep practicing and you keep tweaking it, eventually you're going to be where you want to be as a decorator. So I'm living proof of that. I mean, who would have thought me quitting my job, going into eBay, fighting for this Santa cookie cutter and paying $66 for it would end up with me publishing a book and having a successful blog? I never would have dreamed it. So if my dreams can come true, I know that your dreams can come true. So stay tuned because seriously, we're going to take a major deep dive into royal icing. And so I know I didn't answer all your questions here, but maybe we can break it down even more and we can get you guys to become the decorators that you want to be. Bear hugs.